Hi, I'm Meredith Bell, and I'm here today with John Livesay. I'm very excited about interviewing John. He's known as the pitch whisperer because his specialty is helping his clients learn how to be better storytellers so they draw people in and really get them interested in what they have to say. John's also the host of the Successful Pitch podcast, where he brings on guests that give practical tips, not just for startup entrepreneurs that are going to be making a pitch to investors, but also to established entrepreneurs where they need to learn how to make a solid pitch about their products and services to potential clients. And today I'm going to be interviewing him about his outstanding book called The Successful Pitch: Conversations on Going from Invisible to Investable. And I love that title, John. In fact, when I first learned about your book and I saw what it was about, I thought, I've been in business with my two business partners for 26 years. We are not in the position where we need to go make a pitch to potential investors. So I was wondering how relevant some of the content would be to me, but I kept an open mind and I'm so glad I did. It is a fantastic book. I've got so many great ideas that have helped me as I've thought about myself in specific situations. And I know that these ideas would be valuable for any business owner or entrepreneur. So I really want to get into this with you. And the first thing I want to cover with you is, for this particular book, you decided to draw material from your top 10 podcasts. And I was curious, what was it about those interviews that caused you to say, these are the ones I want to include in my book?
Well, first, thanks for having me on, Meredith. I really appreciate your kind words about the book. I'm so glad you got so much out of it. That was my intent, because we have to pitch ourselves all the time. You know, it really was a little bit of Sophie's Choice, if you remember that movie.
I do.
You had so many great guests, and you tried to figure out what would, I think people would love the concept of eavesdropping in on a conversation and learning what they could learn from these amazing people that I've gotten to interview, because that was the joy of putting the book together, was instead of just hearing my viewpoint or maybe one or two other people, you get to hear 10, 11 different people's perspectives. What they all have in common is they're very compelling and they're all great storytellers. And I really feel that storytelling is the secret to success. It always has been. Plato said storytellers rule the world. And the people that I've been fortunate enough to have on the podcast and were gracious enough to be in the book all had great stories and valuable takeaways. For example, Jay Sammet, who wrote a book himself called Disrupt You, was telling me how he looks at failure. He said, you know what? It's feedback. Keep going until you get a zombie idea so great it won't die. Well, I love that. So,
that is a great quote.
Yeah, so people like that have really great stories and takeaways and help us shift our perception on, oh, I'm not afraid of failure anymore. And is this my zombie idea? So we can keep going and going. So no matter how long you've been in business, whether you're seeking funding or not, you constantly have to keep innovating and evolving.
Yes, that is so true. So when you look at what you put into your book and you think about the other books that are out there on, pitching to potential investors or pitching your product, what is it that you feel makes yours different from those other books?
Well, it's the sum is greater than, the individual parts. And that you can read a book from someone who's gotten funded. You can read a book on how to pitch, but the Successful Pitch book and podcast takes the combined wisdom of lots of people from lots of different industries and different experiences, and puts it all in one place. And if one particular interview or chapter isn't particularly resonating with you, it's not like, oh, well, this book doesn't make sense for me. I still have 9 chapters of people who I could, get into what they're having to say. So interviewing people from Switzerland and Israel and, of course, all over the U.S., makes for a really compelling way to look at the same topic from different perspectives and get insights. And the goal was to feel like you're listening in on a conversation as opposed to a lecture.
And it very much felt that way. It wasn't academic at all. It was real life, and it was fascinating to me. They all told such great stories. Mm-hmm. Each chapter was compelling. I love that word. Mm-hmm. And so, to tell you the truth, it was hard for me to narrow down which of these interviews we'd focus on in our conversation today, because honestly, I took notes from every chapter. There were some really great takeaways. So this is just a representative sample, what I'm going to be asking you now. And I'd encourage people to read the whole book because there are so many more ideas in there. So the first one I want to start with was that chapter with Guy Spear. He was such an intriguing guest. And of course, he did something I don't know if anyone else has ever done, which was he paid $650,000 to have lunch with Warren Buffett. And I loved the things that he talked about from that experience that he had. And I wanted you to talk today about the number one takeaway that he talked about having from his time with Mr. Buffett that would be helpful to other entrepreneurs.
Sure. Well, that's literally putting your money where your mouth is, isn't it? It was
yes.
Guy and another investor combined their auction at a charity auction to, come up with that amount. So he's very clear that it wasn't all me. I had somebody else who helped me come up with that total amount. And the big takeaway was your network is your net worth. And he was talking with his co-investor, saying, "Well, should we prepare questions? They follow Warren Buffett's philosophy and their own fund that they do." And they decided, you know what? We're not going to ask him for anything. We're not going to try and get our money's worth out of this lunch. Instead, we're just going to thank him for everything he's done, everything he's taught, and tell him how that's impacted our life and not ask for anything. And when they went in with that attitude, Mr. Buffett could feel it. It was only supposed to be an hour lunch, I think. It went on for 3. He since has invited them back many times to have other meetings. And so that's really, don't go in asking for anything. Go in with an attitude of gratitude and build a relationship is the big takeaway.
I love that, because I think this whole idea of how can I provide value, how can I be of service to this person, even if you are paying for the privilege of being with them. I just think that they were so smart to do that instead of coming up with a series of questions. So there are a lot of takeaways just from that one chapter and that approach that they took. And then there was another interview, the one with Tim Sanders, where he talked about this idea of the 5 whys, and that's WHY. And this I found to be such an important idea in the context of solving problems. So would you talk a little bit about that and how it could apply to any business situation?
Yes. Well, Tim was kind enough to write the foreword to my first book. And he himself is an amazing author, from Love is the Killer app to the L Factor on Your Likability to his new book, Storming, which is all about collaboration in selling and how important that is. And Tim has so many great insights. One of them that you pulled out there is problem solving. If you've ever been around a child and you say, you need to put your seatbelt on in the car. And the kid will say, why? Why? Why do I have to do that? Why? And ironically, that's the same. He talks about it in terms of Toyota trying to problem solve a problem they were having in the factory. And that the accepted process there is, why is that? Right? So when you're presented with a problem, the interesting thing is in therapy, when people go to therapy and they say, I'm here because I can't sleep, or I have a problem with eating, or my anger, or whatever your issue is, the therapist calls that the presenting problem, Meredith.
Right.
And that means that's why you think you're here, but that's really not what the real reason is. And the same thing is true in the business world when you're solving a problem. We can't get this car to be made any faster on the production. Well, why is that? Well, because we're constrained on, we don't get the doors in time to complete the car. And why is that? Well, the people that we're getting the doors from have a shortage of steel. Oh, really? And why is that? And you keep digging down and digging down and digging down until you figure out, here's the real core problem we have to solve in order to get the top problem solved. It's a great tool.
Yes, it's one that I've actually used since reading your book, and it has helped me I think of it as peeling back the layers of an onion, what's in the center is not the same as what's on the outside. So I just think that alone is an excellent tool. And because I think we tend to go so fast moving from thing to thing to thing that we don't slow down long enough to really go deep in analyzing. We take the first thing that comes to mind so that we can move on to the next thing. So that really had the effect of slowing me down in my thinking. So I really thought that was great.
Well, that's it's about collaborative conversations within your own team.
Yes.
Right? And then when you're having a collaborative conversation with the client, and they're saying, well, we don't think we can do that. Why is that, right? Or what's preventing you from saying yes? And then you keep having that conversation.
Yes, and I think an important aspect of that, if you're doing it, especially with a potential client, is in a way that feels safe and comfortable for them, so they don't feel like they're under an inquisition or something.
So you have the agreement up front. You have the agreement up front. You're not on the stand. I'm not asking. And the question why can put people on the defensive. So
exactly.
I'm a big proponent of, well, what's the reason for that? Or could you explain that to me a little more? But when you're having a conversation with yourself or with your team, and you can agree that we're going to ask these 5 whys, is everyone okay with that? Then we have that format and it takes off all that pressure.
Yes. Excellent distinction there. So then we move on to David Howitt. And that was another one of my favorite chapters. He had so many good points, but one of them that I just really liked was using the word profit. But of course, it's 2 different profits. One is the PROPHET, and then the other is a profit like you make money in your business. So I wanted to know if you could just talk about what he's referring to there in the difference between those 2.
Yes. So many times people feel that they have to be one person at work and another person off work. And his whole concept is integrating the metaphysical, spirituality, purpose in your life with who you are and what you do. And that you're both the thinker and the dreamer. You're both the artist and the scientist. And even the way he used the analogy of music on the piano key, there are light and dark keys on the piano.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's really this concept of embracing the yin and the yang, and that they're not mutually exclusive, because so many people feel like, well, if I'm making a profit, then all my integrity and my spirituality and my essence of why I'm doing this has to be put aside. He's like, no, they're integrated. And when you integrate them, then everything soars together.
Yeah, it's that idea of being a whole, we are whole beings, whole people. And to honor both aspects, to me, was just a good reminder. I mean, I believe that, but just the way he talked about it was really fascinating. Then I found your conversation with Andrew Goldner really valuable, because this probably convicted me as much as anything that I read there. This idea of busyness versus productivity. Because we can schedule ourselves, fill our calendar with things, but are they really the right things? And he was talking about this in terms of the number of meetings that an entrepreneur might want to schedule with a potential investor. But I also saw this as, scheduling sales calls or meetings with potential clients.
Yes.
And I just think it's so important to look at this when it comes to getting in front of prospects, whoever those people might be. What is the distinction that you and Andrew are making in that particular conversation?
Well, I think the real distinction is that there is a big difference between quality of meetings and quality of appointments and the quantity, right? And so many people think, well, just talk to enough people and you'll eventually get a sale, as opposed to being more strategic. Am I having a meeting with somebody who can't make a decision? Well, I'm busy. So look at me, I'm busy. And you're like, yeah, but you're having the wrong meeting with the wrong person, or you're not preparing enough. If you had fewer meetings that were higher quality and had more compelling reasons and customized pitches, you can probably close more sales, whether it's to an investor or a potential client. So this concept of just being busy as the only thing that you need to do in order to be successful, he really throws out the world. And in fact, he quotes Einstein saying, if you have an hour to solve a problem, spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes solving it.
Yes, I love that. Because I think that just with our hectic pace today, people are jumping in really fast to try to come up with solutions so they can move on to the next thing and not take enough time to, really slow down and question whether something's going to be effective or not.
See what you just did there, Meredith? You were able to look at the theme between the interviews.
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
if Tim Sanders is, why is that? Take the time to have those in-depth conversations. And then Andrew says, oh, focus on quality, not just quantity. In order to have a quality meeting, you have to have that, why is that, why is that, why is that, to figure out what the problem is. So there's a lot of synergy between all of these interviews if you're smart enough to look at those things and pull them out like you just did.
Well, thank you. You're right. And I think that it was fun to really see with those 10 very different people, some of the same themes that ran across what they said, and not looking at them in isolation, but looking across for what do these smart people have in common?
Yes.
And part of that is paying attention to the little things too. And that's why this next person I want to ask you about, Todd Herman, he talked about a storyteller. My goodness, people really have to read your book just to capture the stories that are there, because we can't do justice to them in talking about them here. They're just, in reading their own words, you just felt like you were there. And so in the case with Todd, he told this very profound story about his dad picking up this piece of trash. And Todd referred to that as, and I'm going to quote him, taking care of the cellophane in your life, end quote. So what did he mean by that?
Well, Todd is quite something. He coaches professional athletes on the peak performance, and then does that in the business world, and is a real expert in helping people become more productive, much like he does for athletes. And he had a childhood experience where he was leaving a restaurant with his dad. I don't know, maybe he was 8 or 9, and he got the toothpick from the restaurant, and he peeled off the cellophane from the toothpick and tossed it on the ground, and was using the toothpick. And his father didn't say a word to him. He just picked up the cellophane from the ground. And that was so profound for Todd that his father didn't yell at him or make him wrong. He just took care of the details and let Todd have this life message that when you take care of the details, your life works. So the takeaway for you in business is, a CEO cares about what's on the slides and making sure there are no typos. Everything matters. Oprah's a big proponent of this. God is in the details. So, sometimes people say, oh, you're just a perfectionist. And it doesn't really mean that at all. But it's really about focusing in on all the details of life that, that little bit of trash is not what we want to do to the planet. And we're not the kind of people that litter. So you make those subtle statements that stay with you. And what is your brand? Who do you stand for as a brand? And what does your company stand for? And that affects all your behavior.
That was so profound. I was really struck, since I've been a parent and I'm now a grandparent, at the wisdom that his dad showed by not saying a word,
Mm-hmm.
but his actions spoke.
Yes.
And I think that is such an important message, because we can work really hard on our marketing messages, words that we put out there, and yet people really want to do business with someone they sense they can like and trust, and they're looking to our behavior
Mm-hmm.
and making those determinations. And that just such a profound impact on him for his whole life, but also on the reader, I think, as you really reflect on what
Right.
that meant.
Right. And now, of course, Todd, he has 3 children, so he was going to pass that legacy on.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was so much in so many of these chapters. Let me just pause and ask you to think about, were there 1 or 2 other points from the book that I didn't cover that you'd really like to bring up in our conversation?
Well, you and I are both fans of Judy Robinette and her book, How to Be a Power
Yes.
Connector, and she was kind enough to write the foreword for this book. And she has 3 big secrets to being a power connector that I think really would be a great way to end our chat, which is,
Perfect.
how can I help you, which totally fits your philosophy. In fact, the joke in the business world is, if you want advice, ask for money, and if you want money, ask for advice.
Ah.
So if you say to somebody, I've got this great idea for a startup, I'd love to have you invest with me, they're going to give you advice. You're too early, you're too late. If you say, I've got this great idea for a startup, I'd love your advice on how I can make it better. Then they start collaborating with you, and then they get to know you, and they're like, you know what, I think I want to invest with you because you're coachable and likable. So that's the first thing. How can I help you? And even if you can't figure out how you can help somebody, maybe you're an expert in social media and they're not. Figure out something that you can provide of value. Then the second question is, of course, what advice do you have for me, right? Which ties in to the example there.
Mm-hmm.
Asking people for their advice shows you're coachable, shows you're humble, and allows them to think about that. And then the third one is, who else do you know I could talk to? And that's a big aha for a lot of people, because even if they can't use you, they might know someone who could, and just one introduction can make the difference in your life.
Oh, those are all 3 excellent and very practical. So thank you for sharing those.
Yes.
And thank you for having this conversation with me, John. I just love the things we were able to point out. What I want to let people know about now is, where can they get your book?
Sure. The Successful Pitch, Conversations on Going from Invisible to Investable, is on Amazon. You can go to my website and buy it from there via Amazon. You can follow me at John_Livesay on Twitter, and my website, johnlivesay.com, has all of my podcasts, The Successful Pitch, or you can go to iTunes. So there's lots of places. You can just Google The Pitch Whisperer, and I'll come right up.
That's great. And I highly recommend your podcast. You have fantastic guests that join you, and lots of really usable.
You being one of them.
Yes. Well, yes, I'm excited about having been interviewed by you. And I just love your approach to interviewing people and the stories and value that you bring out from them. And your book is a perfect example of how well you do that, because the reason I think your book is so memorable and valuable is because of your skills as an interviewer in drawing out ideas that are going to be valuable for either your readers or our listeners here. So thank you so much for putting that book together and for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, Meredith. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, John.